This is The Baseline, discussing the hot button topics of the NBA.
Welcome, everybody. You're tuned to The Baseline. Callie Warrenshaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. This is our 2018 NBA Draft Special Edition. That's right. We are going to break it down. All of the top prospects, all of the NBA teams that are involved. The madness begins, and we are ready to give you what you need. Let me go ahead and roll out the red carpet to my right-hand man, 50 grand, www.sharpsports.net. Big Kahuna and PNC, my brother from another mother, Mr. Warren Shaw, repping out of Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Holla back at me, Mr. Shaw. Are we ready to go draft picking? It's kind of nice. It's kind of something like we do up here upstate, man. Apple picking, we do draft picking.
I like it, man. And salute to you and salute to all the fans and listeners of NBA Baseline. This is going to be a fun show, man. Draft time is always great, mid-June, end of June, where we're talking about all these the talent influx and pool that's going to be infiltrating our NBA and then heading out into Summer League and all the great opportunities that are going to be available for them. But as we do this, we're going to come to some revelations, I think, through our conversations with our great guests that I know you're going to introduce right now, bro.
Yeah, most definitely, man. So in our subject of the breakdown, clearly we are going to be talking about the NBA draft. We got a great guest on board, our man Christopher Klein. He is the site expert for Sixer Sense. He's also the contributor for Cowbell Kingdom, excuse me. He's been on our show before. You've heard him break the stuff down, man, and he is very rarely wrong on his insight. He's going to help us go through the prospects and really kind of get us seated in our 2018 NBA Draft Special. So once again, man, we appreciate you and yours for tuning in with us. Be sure to get at my man Shaw at Shaw Sports NBA or get at me at GameFace Lee. The show's Twitter handle at NBA Baseline, available on all the major platforms. So we always ask you, download a platform, find the Baseline NBA podcast, kick back, throw the headphones on, get yourself primally ready as we give you the butter goods and discuss the hot button topics that happens in the association. You know how we do, man. You know how we roll. This is the 2018 NBA Draft Special, so it's time for the breakdown.
Time to break it
down to the bone gristle.
Time now for the breakdown. Callie Warrenshaw of the Baseline NBA podcast, and this is our 2018 NBA Draft Special. And along with this, man, we have a great guest. He's been on our show once before, really provided us some well-founded insight, with the draft. And we felt it would only be right to bring our man Christopher Klein. If you have not checked my man out, he does some awesome work. He is the site expert for Sixer Sense and also contributor for Cowbell Kingdom. Chris, man, thanks for hopping on board with us and helping us to usher in the excitement, the fanfare of this upcoming 2018 NBA draft, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I'm really excited to get going.
All right, so Chris, I want to throw out this scenario to you because a lot of speculation has taken place with reference to LeBron James and the Cleveland Cavaliers and what happened to these guys against the Golden State Warriors. And I thought to myself, what's a good way for us to kind of roll this in nicely with us previewing the upcoming draft class for 2018. So I'm going to throw this scenario out to you. If you basically can go through the guys that we're going to be talking about right now who could have had an instant impact on this past NBA Finals to play alongside of the King, LeBron James, who would you have liked to have seen participating in this past NBA Finals that would have had an impact against those Warriors?
In terms of just best overall prospect in the class, like if I could pick anyone, I would say Doncic is probably the most NBA ready and probably the most. I have him at the top of my board right now, and I think his kind of giving LeBron another high-end playmaker and a guy who can play off the ball, shoot well, I think that he probably would have been the most beneficial piece on the board if he was on Cleveland this year.
So you're going against the conventional way of thinking where a lot of people are saying you can't pass up on a DeAndre Ayton to be number one, or if you're the Phoenix Suns, you just can't pass up on 7 foot. The best overall player, in your opinion, is Doncic, and you think that he can come in and make that immediate impact in the NBA.
Yeah, I have Doncic number one. I mean, Ayton's a close 2. You can almost say 1A, 1B. I think Ayton's ceiling is probably higher just because of his physical tools. And I totally understand Phoenix favoring him at number one. Like, it makes sense. They've always needed some front court help for a while now. So, it's kind of 1A, 1B for me. But in terms of NBA ready guys who can come in and right away just produce at a high level, I would pick Doncic in that scenario.
So that makes some sense to me. So why don't we go ahead and jump right in, to some of this potential draft analysis and where things may go for us here, Chris. So when you talk about Doncic, now again, we're like I said, we're going to focus here a little bit. You're saying you would take in number one, you personally, but what is in your heart of hearts, or what are your sources telling you in terms of what Phoenix would actually do? I know I'm potentially going to be the guy there, but do you take Doncic at number one because not just because of the talent, but do you see like the long term effects of having a backcourt of Doncic and Booker, really being something special for Phoenix long term?
Yeah, I mean, if I was the Suns GM, I would take Doncic just because I think his playmaking with Devin Booker shooting, and they can both kind of play off of one another. And Doncic is a really high IQ player, so I would definitely take Doncic number one. But in terms of what I think will happen, it seems pretty clear at this point, just from all the reports around the internet, around different writers, that Ayton's probably going to go number one. And again, I think Ayton and Booker would be an awesome pairing too. Ayton can pass. He's not some ball-dominant post-up big, which is what he's kind of being made out to be in some circles, which I disagree with. So I think you can't really go wrong either way. I would favor Doncic, but Ayton's probably going to be the pick, and I think he's going to be a really, really great player himself.
Out of and I don't want us to go so deep with the perception about what the Phoenix Suns may or may not do, but I do feel like part of the perception of what the Suns could potentially do, I think, is driven on the direction that they're trying to go. So they hire a new head coach in Igor Kokoskov, and I feel like the narrative for the Phoenix Suns is that they just never get it right when it comes to their bigs. And as far as with their front court. Now they already have a guy like Tyson Chandler there, and they're still trying to figure out what to do with this dude. But in your opinion, do you feel that there is so much more upside with that combination of Doncic and Booker, that it gives them more flexibility for the additional draft picks that they have in the first round, and also with the fact that they do have their previous class of players that they're still sorting through? There's more flexibility if they go that route of going with a high-end point guard pick as their top pick.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting that you mentioned the later picks, because there have been, reports about them wanting to trade back into the top 10 for another pick. And in that scenario, if they're trying to get someone like Trae Young or a Mikal Bridges, there's more perimeter backcourt talent kind of towards the back end of the lottery. So in that case, if that was their goal, I could understand taking Ayton number one and trying to pair him with another high-end perimeter piece like Young. But I think if we're just, picking first and 16th, I think just the versatility that comes with adding somebody like Doncic to your backcourt, where you can have a 6'8" guy kind of handling the ball, creating the offense, and Devin Booker's kind of improved his playmaking a bit in last year. So I would definitely favor Doncic if they're just going to stick at 1 and 16. But if they're going to trade up, that would kind of be where I can see Ayton coming into the picture.
So I mean so Chris, that's a great conversation to have right now. So again, we're going to stick with Phoenix here a little bit, then we're going to move off, obviously. But so to get into this, to get another pick in the top 10, right? They're going to have us obviously have to offer for 16, and then what do you think? Which combination or which player do you think is the most likely bait that can get them another top 10 pick one way or another?
Yeah, they'd obviously have to give up the 31st pick and maybe a future pick or two to get in. They already have 16. You don't want to give up someone like Bender or Chris. I don't think Chris is going to be a special player, but I'm buying into his upside for now as somebody who can be a piece at some point down the line. So, maybe you give up somebody on the bench, another guy who can kind of be it kind of depends on what team you're trading with too. Like if that team's looking for a long-term piece, or if they're the Cavs or the Sixers and they're looking for someone who can help them win right now. So there are a lot of different scenarios that kind of could play out here, but they're obviously going to have to give up basically the rest of their picks in this draft, outside of maybe some of the back end second rounders, and probably at least one or two legitimate contributors on the current roster.
Okay, so now let's move off of Phoenix a little bit here too. And a lot of people feel like, okay, if Aiton is a clear-cut number one, and well, obviously we know where you stand with Aiton, and then where you stand with Doncic, but Sacramento, I'm seeing a lot of Marvin Bagley into that situation. Would you be wary of putting, if Aiton goes number one, would you be wary of Sacramento taking Doncic and trying to pair him alongside De'Aaron Fox?
Yeah, I mean, right now it looks like Bagley's the favorite, and I understand that. I think I have him in my top four, which I know there are a lot of draft guys who have kind of pushed him back, don't really buy into his defense, but I think Bagley is one of the higher upside athletes, offensive talents in the draft. So I understand them and, the hype, but again, I would still favor Doncic, obviously, but I think Bagley's probably the guy they're going to go with, and that makes sense in some.
Well, so you provide an interesting scenario here because if we're going to go by your mock draft, right, saying that you're predicting that the Suns would take Doncic, or he should be the number one pick for the Phoenix Suns, that means that now Aiton and Bagley are vying for that two position. And if you're the Sacramento Kings, which would you go with in this particular sense? Because clearly, if you go Aiton, that means that you're probably moving Willie Cauley-Stein back to the four position, which is not going to be a good look because he's not skilled enough. So that means you're playing Aiton now at a four like position, and that combination I find to be very weird for the Sacramento Kings. So it's an interesting scenario that's going to play here because if you are the Kings, you can't pass on the best talented player that has the most upside. But clearly, it means that somebody is going to wind up riding the pine if they get drafted at number two.
Yeah, I think if Aiton did theoretically go to Sacramento, I think Cauley-Stein would either be traded or moved to the bench because there's just not enough spacing. If you're going to put Aiton in the middle of the lineup and you're going to build around him, especially with a guy like De'Aaron Fox, who's already not the greatest shooter at point guard, you're going to have to put three other at least NBA average or above average shooters around him. So I would think they have to trade or put Cauley-Stein on the bench. Maybe they start someone like Skal Labissière who can space the floor a little bit more, but I think they'd probably be looking for another kind of stretch four to put into the starting rotation if Aiton was theoretically the guy they ended up picking.
So Doncic is getting a lot of play here in the first couple of minutes of our show here now because, again, going by these theories, so to speak, then Atlanta comes up at number three with an interesting situation. Do you feel like Doncic would be able to send Dennis Schroeder out of town if he was still available at number three?
Yeah, I mean, I think Doncic is the higher upside player. I think Schroeder, I don't know if I would buy Schroeder as a starting point guard on a legitimate contender. He's obviously a talented scorer, get to the rim, kind of play make in that sense, but he's not kind of the next level player that's going to carry Atlanta to the future. He doesn't necessarily sound like he wants to be there with some of the reports that have come out recently. So I think if Doncic is there at number three, Atlanta, he should be the heavy favorite. I don't know if he is. I see Jaren Jackson, Mo Bamba there in a lot of mocks. But yeah, I think Doncic has to be the guy if you're Atlanta and he's available.
Now, you bring up an interesting scenario, Chris, where, there's been a lot of talk about Mo Bamba. Really, really, really a lot of emphasis that this guy could actually sneak into that lottery slot just simply because of the workouts that he's been showing people leading up to the NBA draft. And so I don't want to skip completely out of turn, but if we are talking about outside of these lottery guys, the 1, 2, 3 guys, a team like the Memphis Grizzlies or a team like the Dallas Mavericks, do you see Mo Bamba being drafted by one of these particular teams? And if not, would it be considered a complete miss or a myth if they don't do it?
Yeah, I actually have Bamba third on my board. Like, I've always been kind of a fan of him. He's a really smart player. Has always, just reading stories back to when he was in high school. He's always been had a really great work ethic. A really smart player, wants to learn, wants to improve his game. You've seen that in interviews and workouts before the draft. His defensive ceiling is as high as anyone in the league. A 7'10" wingspan is really insane, and he's a mobile athlete. He can use that length to kind of stick with guys on the perimeter, even if he's not the quickest guy laterally. He's showing more offensive upside lately in these workouts. So I don't think Bamba drops out out of the top 5. And I wouldn't be surprised if he goes second or third.
So in my estimation, or from what our conversation that we're having here right now, the draft really does start at 4. And I think a lot of what we're discussing too is because certain teams have certain players already currently on their roster in those positions. What does happen? When if the best talent available is a player that or fits a position that a player that they already have on their roster. In the case of Memphis, Bamba comes in there. What do you do with Gasol? Does that now signify the end of the Gasol era, or would they now look at more like a guy like Jaren Jackson, potentially to try to go into the power forward position?
Yeah, I think with Memphis, since Marc Gasol can shoot as well as he can, you can kind of pair some of those front court guys with him. I don't know if Bamba Gasol is the best fit, but I think Jaren Jackson and Marvin Bagley would both be guys who could play next to Gasol because of how well Gasol spaces the floor. Jackson and Bagley can both shoot themselves, both attack on straight line drives and pass the ball. So I think that would be a decent fit. But also, if you're Memphis, I don't think Marc Gasol is kind of the long-term answer at this point.
Right.
So I think you're taking best player available and kind of building toward the future. Like whether you play him behind Gasol or with Gasol, you're really building around him long-term and not Gasol.
So does that then leave Dallas in a situation of just like, all right, well, whatever's left, you know what I mean? Like whatever, those guys don't take, like they're just going to take whatever they can get potentially, because it doesn't seem like they don't seem like they're going to be in the position where Doncic would be available. I don't think they'd go Trae Young there. I don't know, but what's your sense of what Dallas would eventually do, and then what positions are they trying to fill primarily since they already have Dennis Smith Jr. and Harrison Barnes?
Yeah, you saw the report. There was a report I think today or yesterday about Dallas and Sacramento being two teams that are trying to trade down. So that might be where their mindset is right now. But I think if you're them, you have to pick, the leftovers from Bagley, Jackson, and Bamba. Like whoever's left, I don't think Doncic will be there at that point, like you said. But whichever one of those three is left, I think has to be the guy. Wendell Carter might be in that discussion because Dallas has been looking for a front court piece for a really long time. But I think you kind of just have to take whoever's left, like you said.
Chris Klein joining us here on the Baseline NBA podcast. This is our 2018 NBA Draft Preview Special. Be sure to catch our man on Twitter at Klein NBA. So Chris, like it's so interesting, how this is starting to shape up because, under most circumstances, we wouldn't be talking about possible trades or possible moves that could happen on draft night simply because it's all been about the draft talent, right? But now with the fluctuation of what's happening in the NBA and that there's some possible high-end free agents, of course, we're talking about, LeBron James, who could again swing the momentum of even how certain lottery teams might actually make a play. So you brought up the situation regarding a Marc Gasol. What's the likelihood, in your opinion, when you look at some of these guys, some of these teams that may have high-end free agent players that they're looking to probably offload or move from a different direction because of the talent that is now shown for this upcoming draft class? What's the likelihood? Like, can you give a percentage of what you may think might be a possible trade that happens on draft night for those type of teams that do have a player like a Marc Gasol or such?
Yeah, I think Memphis and Dallas, just seen over the past couple of weeks, are both teams that would, I don't want to say likely, but have a decent chance of trading their pick. Sacramento was in that discussion as well. If they don't love one of the guys at 2 and think they can get another really good big at 5 or 6 or something, maybe they trade back. I don't think Philly's going to trade their pick. They're one of the teams that is in the LeBron discussion, and I think they're kind of planning on drafting someone who can play next to a star like LeBron or Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid, who are already there. But, I think Sacramento, Memphis, Dallas are all teams that you can reasonably expect at least one of them to move on draft night.
So I want to get into this conversation now. Listen, we have Orlando and Chicago to talk about them, et cetera, but let's skip ahead for a second here really quickly. So it's going to go back to LeBron James somewhat for Cleveland and what they're going to do. Now, who do you think realistically could Cleveland go after at their position currently slotted at number 8 that could be the next, not LeBron, but the next guy that they can hitch their wagon to for a couple of seasons, or well, not a couple of seasons, but for the next generation, so to speak. Because to me, I feel like I know there's a lot of upside with Michael Porter, but there's a lot of risk, in that as well too.
Yeah.
But do you feel like that is like, okay, that is an acceptable risk? That's a home run pick that you can take at number 8, or do you go something a little bit more, a little bit more conventional, like Colin Sexton or Miles Bridges or something like that?
Yeah, with the top 8 in this class, I'm really high on just in general. I think there's a lot of star potential in that top 8. Michael Porter was the number 1 prospect on most boards coming into the season. Like, his injury is obviously a concern, but he's 6'10", 6'11", can score off the bounce at all 3 levels. Just a really fluid athlete. Like, there's a lot of upside with someone like him. And I think Trae Young, I'm really high on him too. Obviously an elite shooter, elite playmaker in the pick and roll. He has a lot of defensive concerns, but offensively, he has the toolkit to be a really special player. So I think if either of those guys are available at 8, they have to be the pick. Bridges, like you said, Miles and Mikal are more. I don't know if they have the upside as some of those guys, but they'd be really solid. Could come right in and contribute at a high level from day one kind of picks. Wendell Carter Jr. might be there. He's another really solid big man who can create, kind of drawing Al Horford comparisons. He's a smooth footwork in the post, good passer, can shoot. There's a lot of guys there that I really like, and I think would be fine in Cleveland.
All right, so now the other elephant in the room, so to speak, has been the rise and fall of Trae Young. The highly coveted at the beginning of the college season point shooting guard from out of Oklahoma. Man, listen, the speculation for Trae Young is that he's been as high as going, being selected by possibly the Atlanta Hawks, and then maybe being as low as possibly the New York Knicks. Where do you see a guy like this where people have, made him a hybrid Steph Curry? Clearly he fell off, in the second half of the season, and also didn't really show, a good performance through the NCAA tournament. But what are we talking about here with this guy? And listen, for teams like the New York Knicks, who have been basically left with the scarlet letter S, right, for not getting a Steph Curry when they had the opportunity. How many teams may actually wind up paying the price by not drafting a guy like Trae Young, or is it worth the risk to bypass him because he may not be all the hype that everyone is talking about?
Yeah, I have Trae Young 7th, I think, or 6th or 7th on my board. Just what holds me back is his defensive concerns, because he's really small, he's thin, he's not really a great athlete. And we saw during the playoffs where smaller guards are just getting killed on switches by these bigger, more athletic teams. And I think that's going to be an issue for him once he's at, a high competitive level on whatever team he's on. But, offensively, a guy who can space the floor like he can, I think he'll be fine moving off the ball. I think his percentages will be a lot higher maybe than they were at Oklahoma once he has more variety. When he's not carrying the load that he was at Oklahoma, where he's handling the ball every possession, where he can work off the ball, run around screens, do that kind of stuff, I would understand him going anywhere between 3 and 9. Like, I think his upside is high enough to take that kind of risk at 3. But with his defensive concerns, I wouldn't be surprised if he did drop to, New York or Cleveland at 8.
So I want to go back to an earlier point that you had made, or we were making kind of collectively, so to speak. And it goes back a little bit to last year. So you talked about Sacramento. You talked about Dallas potentially maybe wanting to move back. Now, do you feel like there is some of that people are trying to replicate the Danny Ainge situation from last year, where he dropped back, got the guy he wanted, and again, year 1 results, he made the right decision. Tatum is better than Markelle Fultz right now. I'm in this space. Do you feel like, because we know the NBA is a copycat league, that a lot of GMs are now going to try to, get on the Ainge train and try to, tap into their inner Buddha, so to speak, and figure out, okay, well, what's the best thing? Can I move back and still get the best guy available? Do you see that kind of potentially playing out with some of these teams?
Yeah, I think especially because of just how deep, the top area of this year's class is. Of a team, there are going to be teams who like Michael Porter and Trae Young just as much as they like someone like Bagley or Jackson. So if that's the case, they might want to move back, take the guy they like, who they've interviewed, who they've worked out with, who they're really confident in, and then get another pick in the future that might turn out to be a good prospect, just like Boston, who might get a top 5 pick next year. So I definitely think that's a possibility just because of how deep the top 8 or so in this year's class is.
Chris Klein joining us here, our 2018 NBA draft special. As we further things along, going through the list, man. So here's, and I know that we've been bouncing back and forth, man, because we're trying to get in as much as we possibly can. So I certainly appreciate you, Chris, for, I'm saying, opening up that cosmos of a mind that you possess and allow us to explore all of these potential, superstars, so to speak, that could come in and have an immediate impact on some of these teams. One team in general that I'm really looking at, that I felt like they're somewhere in the middle of either finding their niche in being great and young and great, and then suddenly just falling back again, and that's a team like the Chicago Bulls. And a lot has been said about this basketball team because now that they have Lauri Markkanen and they have Valentine, they have some nice quality pieces they can build around. But clearly the issue has been in the point guard position. CBS has Colin Sexton from Alabama as being a possible draft selection. Where do you see the Chicago Bulls team? If you're in the GM seat right now, where do you think their focus really should be under the helm of Fred Hoiberg once again?
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of it depends on kind of the direction they want to take in free agency with guys like Zach LaVine. Like if they plan on giving LaVine a max contract, they might want to go for a wing that complements him, like Mikal Bridges or Miles Bridges or even Kevin Knox. But if they aren't going to max out LaVine and they're going to kind of build around Markkanen, you might want to add another point guard. I think Trae Young would probably be the best available option for them. But I could see them going with either a guard or a wing.
So let's talk about your team, or assumed it was your team for a little bit here, Philadelphia. I know you mentioned them here a couple seconds ago too. So with all that is looming with them now, our guy Brett Brown going to be running the draft, and with the Brian Colangelo situation, the potential to be in LeBron conversations this summer. What is the safest move for them? Still knowing that they need to develop Markelle Fultz as well too, and JJ Redick going to be a free agent. No sense of what he's actually doing this summer. Do they just go ahead, draft a 2-guard and call it a day, or do they look for some other supplemental parts that can kind of help the roster moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of safest pick, I think Mikal Bridges is obviously a guy who can slide in, defend at a high level, shoot, work off the ball. Like in terms of just safe, high floor picks, he's the guy. But I'm really kind of a fan of Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. They really lack other playmakers outside of Ben Simmons. That obviously gets better if Fultz returns to form. But Gilgeous-Alexander is a really crafty pick and roll guy, should be a decent shooter, at least at the next level, spotting up at least. And, he's one of the longest point guards there is. He will be once he's in the league. He has a really high defensive ceiling. I'm really high on him. Lonnie Walker's another guy who's been shooting up boards lately. So I would kind of prefer Gilgeous-Alexander or Walker personally at 10, but Mikal would probably be the safest pick, and I wouldn't have an issue with him either. I think he's a really solid prospect.
So is it that simple that we're saying that, if the Philadelphia 76ers, where they're situated and where they're positioned at, that they don't want to over dip in the talent pool, that they obviously want to play it in a way where even if they draft somebody that might be considered expendable, it's at the expense of knowing that they're getting the upgraded talent if they do get a guy like LeBron James?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're picking for guys who can contribute at a high level for a competitive team. They're expected to be, a top 3 team in the East next year, probably better than they were this year. You already got Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid who will be running most of the offense. So I think that's where a lot of the Mikal love is coming from, because he's a guy who can step right in, fits Brett Brown's system, another really long defender, which is also something they lacked, long athletic defenders in the Boston series. So I think that's a lot of where why Mikal Bridges is such a is projected there so often. So I think you are looking for guys who can contribute to a winning team, but I don't think there's any harm done in going for one of the higher upside guys like Walker or Alexander.
So let's go 2-for-1 in a multiple 2-for-1 scenario here. We got the Clippers coming up. I'm just going to skip over Charlotte, and I'm just no interest in what they're doing. So the Clippers have 2 picks, 12 and 13, and then Denver at 14. All reports are they don't even want their pick. Like they'd much rather find a way to give that up and get some different assets available. Do you see LA keeping both picks, keeping one pick? What are you hearing regarding that? And then again, has there been any movement with Denver trying to get out of 14?
I haven't really seen any reports about Denver, but it does seem like LA wants to move up, and that makes sense. They're kind of in a weird place as an organization where they have some talent that could maybe get them into the playoffs, but they're really kind of starting to rebuild around guys like Tobias Harris. So I think if you can trade up into the top 8 and get a really high-level prospect to put next to him, that would make sense. If you can get a Michael Porter or a Trae Young, to kind of build around moving forward, I think that's what they'll do. But I don't think there's, the lottery, there's a lot of really solid perimeter pieces available in that 12, 13 range as well. So sticking there and picking 2 solid wings or another point guard, Sexton, Young, Gilgeous-Alexander, I don't think there's any harm in doing that either.
So when we're talking about the Los Angeles Clippers, though, this has always been the problem, that even from a drafting perspective, they go with pizzazz. They go with the wow factor. But now they're at a state where some of the players that they have, they're not going to wow you, right? No matter what happens. So if you were looking at these guys and saying to yourself, how should the Los Angeles Clippers, with these picks, if they can't do anything with them, how should they essentially be drafting? Should it be that they continue this trend, that they get like the guys that, are above the rim, probably jump up out the gym, but are not wholesale winners? Or really should they start building around this idea? Because you mentioned just a moment before, you said they're looking to probably build around Tobias Harris. I'm a little skeptical about that. But even if that were the case, should that be the mantra of the Los Angeles Clippers, given the fact that they do have 2 picks that are, within the top 15?
Yeah, I don't think there's a lot of guys in that area who are going to be kind of like high fly, pizzazz kind of players. I think Zaire Smith is obviously kind of maybe the best of both worlds in a sense that he's a really smart, competitive player. He plays a smart brand of basketball. He's not going to do anything dumb, but at the same time, he's going to have a lot of highlight reel plays just because he's probably the best athlete in the draft. So if that's kind of the direction they wanted to go, where they want to get kind of a high energy, excite the crowd kind of player, Smith would be an awesome option at 12 or 13. And I think they probably need to draft a point guard just to have a long-term point guard. And I think Gilgeous-Alexander is probably going to be there. So he would be my favorite in terms of someone they need to pick.
So let's talk about the Washington Wizards and that whole situation. I think I predicted not predicted, but I said if there was going to be a big splashy move this summer, somebody thinking that we're not discussing, really, it might be a trade of John Wall or Bradley Beal and then potentially breaking up that duo. That aside, do the Wizards really need to focus on, they need to focus on shoring up that bench. That's for sure. So do they go with just trying to get some bench depth here, or do they start trying to look at, all right, we need to get a guy that can eventually replace Gortat at the center position? And is there a quality big that you see that would be available for them at 15 potentially?
Yeah, after the season when John Wall was kind of throwing Gortat under the bus, saying they need another athletic big, I think Robert Williams is a guy who kind of fits that role, a really hyper-athletic rim runner who can play above the rim, defends at a high level on the other end. Mahinmi and Gortat aren't going to be the centers of the future. So if they are going to keep kind of building around Wall and Beal, if that's the plan moving forward, I think Robert Williams would make a lot of sense there. And if they aren't, obviously, if they're going to trade Wall and Beal, if that's the plan, there's a lot of perimeter pieces there on the wing especially that are high-end defenders, solid point guards who would make sense as an option as well.
So who do you see Robert Williams kind of comparing to? And I know a lot of people hate this conversation, who is he like? But do you get a sense of like what type of player Robert Williams can be? Because I think he's like 6'8", 6'9", or something like that as well too. So I know today's NBA is changing, and got guys like Jordan Bell playing center and things like that in Golden State. But who do you think Robert Williams can compare as most like in the NBA currently, if anybody?
Yeah, comparisons are always tough, especially with some of these guys in college where they don't necessarily play their natural position. Williams projects as a really strong rim runner. He can, run the pick and roll a lot, but he didn't run the pick and roll much at all at A&M. He played power forward a lot, and that's just not where he's going to play in the NBA. But in terms of hyper athletic, 6'10", I think a 7'5" wingspan, plays above the rim well, can defend well. Guys like DeAndre Jordan kind of come to mind. I think he's probably a more agile perimeter defender than DeAndre. But just guys like that, I think that's kind of the lane he's going into at the next level.
Well, there are two teams that have actually surprised people in some way, shape, or form. We knew that they were going to be good, but we didn't think they were going to be this good. That are hovering around in that first round. That I really want to get your take on. The Minnesota Timberwolves and the Utah Jazz. They came out of the really tough Northwest Division, probably one of the toughest divisions. Both of these teams clearly has a ton of upside. The emergence of Donovan Mitchell. You look at the combination of the Big Cat with Jimmy Butler. Both of these guys sit in interesting positions because clearly these teams still need something else to really kind of push them in that conversation where we're saying these are legit teams that can pose as a threat to the Golden State Warriors. Is there any possibility they could find something position where they are 20 and 21 that's in the draft, or is it more so that they have to continue to add that young talent to the depth aspect of things for them to be able to start continuing that trend upward from what they've done this past season?
I think, with Utah, I think their priority should be adding kind of another guard who can help Donovan Mitchell carry the ball handling load kind of, but also space the floor, which Ricky Rubio doesn't do particularly well, kind of another on-ball kind of guy to fit with Mitchell. And I think they have a couple of really interesting options in that respect with Dante DiVincenzo out of Villanova, who's been shooting up boards lately. Elie Kobo, who's from France, he's kind of in that range by now. And you got guys like Anthony Melton, who might not space the floor as much, but he's another ball handler, really long defender. I think those are guys they're going to consider at 21. Even Grayson Allen, I think there's a report that they're interested in him at 21. So I think guys like that are probably where they're going to go. Maybe they go with a stretch 4 to put next to Gobert. So Keita Bates-Diop would be another name to watch.
Hey,
and with Minnesota,
Chris, real quick, I'm just curious from you. No, it's completely fine. I'm just curious. Why isn't Dante DiVincenzo not getting enough discussion, especially as a late first rounder? Because it's interesting that you mentioned him. When I think of him, and I saw how he played in the championship, the first thing I thought about was a far more athletic Gordon Hayward, which I think would fit perfectly for the Utah Jazz. To your point. Because not only could he play that 2, you can slide him at the 3, you can move Joe Ingles at the 3. I just think there's a lot of versatility there, and playing, under the tutelage of Quinn Snyder, I think would just be a completely win-win situation for him.
Yeah, I think DiVincenzo would probably be my number one option just based on who's projected to be available at 21. He's obviously a plus athlete. I think he can probably be the lead guard for a team down the line. And, with Mitchell, he's an elite shooter, so just having a guy who can work on and off the ball next to Mitchell, another athletic point guard who plays hard on defense, I really think DiVincenzo would make a lot of sense at 21. And I think there's a good chance that he goes there or he gets solid looks there just based on how high his stock has risen after the Combine and after the NCAA tournament. So, I would say DiVincenzo would be my favorite for the Jazz at 21.
So, I want you to go ahead and finish your thought on Minnesota. And then I'm going to jump back in and go back a couple picks in the draft.
Yeah, I think with Minnesota, you're probably looking for either another long-term guard since Jeff Teague isn't really going to be the guy there a few years down the road. I don't know. I think Tyus Jones is a really solid player, but they don't seem to really they don't necessarily seem that confident in him based on how much playing time Derrick Rose got in the playoffs. So I would think a guy like Akobo, DiVincenzo, again, guys like that would make sense, or maybe adding another stretch floor for a guy who can kind of step into the front court. Maybe a Chandler Hutchinson, Keita Bates-Diop from Ohio State. I think those are guys that would make a lot of sense there.
So in this draft, there seems to be a lot of drama, and we've definitely been touching on it throughout in terms of, teams having some situations with some players that they need to address and figure out what their future is going to be. And ironically, the San Antonio Spurs are right in the mix of that right now. As we record, reports are that Pop and Kawhi Leonard are going to meet, et cetera, and maybe they hash things out. The Spurs are a dark horse or pseudo dark horse for LeBron James as well too. If Pop can get in the door and have that meeting, if you're the Spurs and R.C. Buford and company, where are you going with this pick? At 18, are you just like, listen, again, I know the mantra is usually just best player available, but are you really trying to fill the wing position? You're trying to get a Danny Green replacement? You're trying to get a Kawhi replacement? Are you trying to usurp, Paul Gasol as a center and trying to do something there? What would be your sense, or where would you go if you're the San Antonio Spurs at 18?
Yeah, I think obviously the ideal thing would be to add a big man, but out between Robert Williams and kind of the 30, kind of late first, early second range, there aren't really many good big men. So if Williams is gone, I think you kind of have to go on the perimeter, find another solid wing. Kevin Huerter's someone who's been kind of shooting up draft boards lately, probably the best off-ball shooter in the draft. Smart player as well. I really like him. I think he would be probably one of the better options if he's available there. You got guys like DiVincenzo again, Hutchinson, Melton, Okogie. There are a lot of kind of long, athletic two-way wings in that range who could be on the Spurs radar. And, with their developmental group, coaching staff, I think any one of them would probably find a way to succeed there.
Chris Klein joining us here. Chris, look, we can spend all night long, breaking this stuff down. There's probably a few more questions though that I want to kind of pick your brain at with reference to this upcoming draft. We tend to overlook guys that I really think don't get enough play, don't get enough hype, that could be a considered dark horse. And I'm really curious to get your take on who you consider to be a dark horse pick. Someone that nobody is talking about, but probably when drafted in the right area, has the potential to be, it has an inside shot to be a rookie of the year candidate, or come in and really turn some heads like Donovan Mitchell did this past season.
Yeah, I think one of my favorite dark horses would be a guy I've mentioned a few times with the last couple of teams, is Elie Okobo, who's playing overseas in France right now. He just had a 44-point game in the postseason of like a week ago. He's a really solid athlete, long on the perimeter, shifty ball handler, good shooter, should be able to grow as a playmaker. Like, he's a really solid point guard prospect with a lot of upside that I don't think is getting nearly enough discussion. I have him in my top 20 right now. And I think if he goes in that, 17, 18 to 30 range, I think he could be a really solid player. I don't know if he comes over this year necessarily, but I think he's going to be, one of those dark horse under the radar guys who turned into a really solid NBA player.
So there are a couple teams right now, by my estimation, that don't have first round picks. Detroit and OKC, primarily Detroit making a head coaching decision. I don't think Toronto is in there. I don't think they have a first round pick as well too. Do you think either of those teams try to get into the first round? Toronto, OKC, right? Do they try to get in there to inject some life? Because I look at a team like the Lakers, right? And just by virtue of what they're potentially trying to do this summer, having a 25 pick and having, slotted money that's going to hit their cap, I know they have a very low ceiling right now going into it, but they may need every single dollar. Do you think that's a team that some of these other teams may try to target and try, let me get that 25 pick, because the Lakers are trying to create as much cap space as they possibly can to get two major free agents come to them this summer?
Yeah, I mean, the Lakers and I think the Sixers at 26 and the Hawks at 30, just because the Sixers might not want to add 2 first-round picks with guaranteed contracts, considering what they're trying to do in free agency, and the Hawks have 3 first-round picks, and they need all the talent they can get, but they might not want to use all 3. those are all teams that could kind of trade out of their spots, maybe target a few second rounders. And like you said, I think Detroit, especially, I don't know what they would have to trade up with, but they kind of need an infusion of young talent. So I think that would make a lot of sense. Toronto as well, if they're kind of planning to move past the Lowry DeRozan era, adding another young piece to kind of help their rebuild, get kick-started, that would also make sense. So I definitely think there are some teams towards the back end of the first round that might be looking to trade out.
And then, let's talk about Golden State for a second here. Now, just coming off the heels of the NBA championship, they've made no bones about the fact that they want to get some younger talent available for them. You look at that roster, obviously they're very top heavy. I'm not quite sure what they're going to be able to do with like the Quinn Cooks and Patrick McCaws and even the David Wests of the world, so to speak. But what's the best type of situation or what's the best player that you think that they can get that can offer them somebody who can contribute? Because we saw it this year, that their bench, at least in the regular season, those guys had to play some decent minutes for them. Given they go through anything like that again next season, what's the best potential player available for them to contribute to them?
Yeah, there are a lot of kind of long two-way wings that could be molded into solid players kind of towards the back end of the first round. I think Josh Okogie from Georgia Tech is one of those guys who could very well be available at 28. He's a really long, versatile defender, one of the more versatile, hard-nosed defenders in the draft, really. Getting those kind of guys who play both ends of the floor well, he should be able to shoot the ball at a decent enough clip. I think those are kind of the guys they'll be targeting. So, Josh Okogie, Melvin Frazier from Tulane, Jacob Evans, just guys like that are probably names to keep an eye on with regards to Golden State.
So, do you feel like a guy like Jalen Brunson can sneak into the first round here in any way, shape, or form?
Yeah, I really like Brunson a lot. He's in my top 30. And, just if a team, in terms of the guy with a really high floor, steady hand, smart playmaker, can shoot, play on and off the ball, I think he's going to carve out a niche at the next level. I don't really have much concern about him flopping or anything like that. So I definitely wouldn't be surprised if, a team at kind of towards the end there, even Golden State, was attracted to a guy like that and picked him just, a safe, ready-made NBA contributor.
And I got one more question with this first round, and maybe Seal will chime in with some other things that we'll pepper you with a little bit. But is there any reason for Boston to draft somebody right now that they can add to this roster, or are they going to go like the draft and stash route, or potentially trade out of it, like we were talking about with LA or even Atlanta, and Philadelphia with its teams that have multiple picks, although the Boston doesn't have multiple picks in the first round? Do you see them adding another young guy to this team, or do you feel like it may be a draft and stash situation?
Yeah, I think so, just because Terry Rozier eventually and Marcus Smart this offseason might have kind of pressed themselves out of contracts with Boston because of how well they played. And, thinking long term, they might need to add another guard who can kind of help fill those roles. So someone like Jalen Brunson, Grayson Allen apparently had a really good workout with him the other day. Guys like that, I think, are going to be on their radar. So I would expect them to add another guard at 27.
Is there any are there any prospects that are in the second round who really have some upside? Second round draft with first round capabilities outside of Brunson.
Yeah, Jared Vanderbilt from Kentucky. He was a 5-star guy. He started off the season in my top 15, I think. He can't really shoot, but he's 6'9", 6'10", can handle the ball really well, plus athlete. Probably the best rebounder in the draft, up there with Marvin Bagley, just in terms of effort and motor. Really versatile defender, should, defend 4 or 5 positions at a decent level. He's had a few foot surgeries now, so injuries are kind of what's holding his stock back. But in terms of pure upside, he's a guy to watch. And I think Arnoldus Kuboka, I don't know if I pronounced that right, but he's kind of one of those draft and stash guys that I'm really high on. He's a really fluid scorer, 6'11", can shoot, handle the ball pretty well. He's really thin. He's going to need to add some muscle to last at the NBA level. But he's a guy who I think him and Vanderbilt especially have some of the higher ceilings in the second round.
My final question for you. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Shaw, please.
Yeah, sorry, and then jump right in right after this. Yeah, so you mentioned a lot of guys with specific skill sets, a lot of two-way guys as well too, especially from the wing position. So I think by most people's account, Trey Young is the best shooter in the draft, right? And Bamba might be the best shot blocker, so to speak. But who are like when you quote unquote well, those guys they project to be all around players, but those are skill sets that they do very very well. Who are some of the specialists that you see in this draft like that? So after Young, who's your next best shooter that's going to be available? And then after Bamba, like who's your next best shot blocker that you see available?
I think Jaren Jackson Jr. for shot blocking is probably the easy number two there. He averaged over 3 blocks a game at Michigan State in pretty limited minutes. Just his instincts, his athleticism, it's really impressive. He's probably the best defender right now, just technically and fundamentally the best defender. Bamba has a higher upside, and he'll probably block more shots eventually, just given his work ethic and desire to improve. But Jaren Jackson would be the easy number two for me there. And in terms of the best shooters, I think Kevin Huerter, who I mentioned earlier, out of Maryland, just a knockdown guy, sniper coming off screens, can hit off-balance shots, kind of in that J.J. Redick, Marco Bellinelli mold. He's about 6'7". He's in my top 15, just a knockdown shooter who I think is going to carve out a role at the next level.
All right, backdraft, man, backdraft. So what do I mean by backdrafts? I mean guys that, they'll get drafted, but my man Klein is like shaking his head, just like, I don't think so, man. Overreaching. So who is getting a lot of pub, but no matter where you draft them, you're not seeing a whole lot of success, or is an at-risk type of draft pick for this upcoming
Yeah.
draft?
Colin Sexton is easily at the top of that list for me. I just really don't see the hype with him. He's obviously a solid athlete, strong frame, does a lot of good work scoring, going downhill in transition, but he's not really the greatest at creating for others. His passing numbers weren't that great at Alabama. He's not a knockdown shooter by any means. He's kind of more of an inefficient shot maker than anything else. I have him at 20 right now, and there seems to be a solid chance that he goes 8, 9, 10 in that range. So I think he's the one guy especially who I'm kind of skeptical of, given where his stock is right now.
And then my final one for you, Chris. I mean, again, you've done a superb job of here educating us, educating our fans and our listeners about the draft and things that they can be looking at moving forward. But in any way, shape, or form, right? And it's kind of going back to the start of things a little bit here too. How do you feel like this draft plays out, in totality? Do you feel like there will be fireworks that are available? And again, I know it's hard to, predict the future in that regard, but do you feel like some big names are going to be moved or big picks are going to be moved? Because that Philadelphia Boston trade last year, it really happened like that day. You know what I mean? Like there was no rumors leading into that. It was just all of a sudden an hour before the draft and this is where we were at. It was wild. Do you get any sense that, these things could kind of happen? Or again, like we said, because so many teams have superstars kind of in weird areas, Memphis with Gasol, Kawhi and San Antonio and all of that, LeBron and Cleveland even to some degree, do you get any sense that something major could happen this draft?
Yeah, I mean, like we talked about earlier, if a team like Sacramento is really looking to trade up, that's the top 2 pick and a potentially generational talent that's on the board available for a team to trade up into to select. So I think there's probably going to be a lot of movement just based on the reports that have come out recently. There's a lot of really solid two-way guys kind of towards the middle and the back end of the first half that just based on where the league is right now, I think two-way wings are at a premium. And there's a lot of those really solid defensive three-point shooting guys available that I think are going to be good players. And I think the top 8 has a lot of, kind of star caliber upside. So I think there's a really good chance that we have not only a lot of movement, but a lot of really, really solid players from top to bottom in this class.
My final question for you, Chris, is where will you be seated in witnessing this year's NBA draft?
My living room.
Oh my goodness. No press pass, no inside,
No.
Brian Windhorst, Bob Ryan, like, you know what I'm saying? High end
Yeah,
seat.
I wish.
Well, listen, we had the best seat in the house in as far as being able to cover so many different prospects and so many different scenarios that it would be hard pressed for any one of these available teams, whether they are, playoff contending teams or teams that are lottery draft, echelon teams right now. Everybody has got a vested interest in this year's upcoming draft, and I think it's utterly exciting. And once again, Chris, man, we so appreciate you hopping on board with us, breaking it down and giving us the butter goods about who is the musts and who are possible busts for the 2018 draft special, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, guys. I had a lot of fun.
Most definitely. So once again, man, Chris, we certainly appreciate you hopping on board with us. If anybody doesn't know how to get our man, be sure to check him out on Twitter at KleinNBA, site expert for Sixers Sense, and also contributor for Cowbell Kingdom. You're tuned to The Baseline. Callie, Warren Shaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. And this was The Breakdown.
Still aftermath, and ain't nothing after that.
Time to go aftermath. Callie, Warren Shaw, Baseline NBA podcast. What an awesome breakdown we had. Basically we were witnesses to, Shaw. I mean, the fact that Chris was able to go through the litany of players really puts a highlight on the idea that, this is going to come down to who's going to want to be the creme de la creme. And there's a lot of sporadic talent here. While everyone is still focused on the top heaviness, I think that through the list, there is some sneaky hidden talent, Donovan Mitchell-like type of talent that is running amok in this draft that may not get talked about clearly as much until they find themselves being drafted and playing, donning an NBA jersey and playing in the 2018-19 season.
Yeah, that point resonates with me a lot because, again, we asked Christopher kind of what we thought in terms of will GMs trade down or trade back because there is talent available that they see and that they eye and feel like, hey, you know what, this guy can be even better than maybe this guy that's slotted ahead of us right now by projection, so to speak. Again, I do feel like the copycat scenario that Danny Ainge pulled off last year is going to be invoked by a couple of general managers who tried to outthink the system. And that should be fun. That's going to be really interesting to see who does, trade back and if it backfires on them ultimately. One last thing I'll say about this conversation as well, too, is like, as we were talking, I really found out to myself, I was like, wow, there really are a lot of there's a lot of drama going on in the league right now, and teams that are unsettled and teams that should be maybe making a move in another direction, and free agents that are coming up that is really going to impact what they decide to do. Again, if we talked about Kawhi Leonard, Marc Gasol, even DeAndre Jordan on LA, and they have 2 picks in the lottery that they may be trying to get out of. There's some stuff that needs to be figured out here. So I think draft night is going to be a lot of fun, man.
Not only is it going to be a lot of fun, but it's also going to continue to raise questions about the direction that some of the organizations are headed towards, and really whether or not some of those organizations that we always thought very, very highly of, if they're in a moment of flux, if they're in a state of emergency or in a state of crisis. I mean, it could all trickle down, and a lot of it will be affected by the way that they go about drafting the type of players that they're looking to get. And it also will dictate the possible future for some of these teams. So the timing of this to me is absolutely tantamount to giving us clear indications about how we're going to be talking about these teams in the offseason, what the value and the worth of these players are going to be in reluctance to the way the organization is set up. It's just so many things that really can come from what may happen for this upcoming NBA draft. And it's interesting because maybe it was only 1 or 2 teams last season. Now we're talking about a handful of teams, and even teams that have been well established that fell off the wagon. We're now starting to question about where their process is going to be because some of their organizational ladder has not been filled yet. So a lot of that now is going to dictate the type of players that may actually wind up getting drafted in the direction that those teams are going moving forward.
Right. Yeah. Like I said, it's going to be a lot of potential bringing people in so you can move some others out. And I'm very interested to see with that. I think especially at the top of the draft, you have guys available that might play positions of more established guys that are on current rosters right now. So then what do you do? If Doncic is available in Atlanta, does that mean Schroeder's out of there? If Doncic is available for Sacramento, does that mean De'Aaron Fox is out of there? Can you play those guys together? Like, those are great questions. I'm so excited that we're going to get the answer to here in a couple of days, man.
Definitely. Yeah. So once again, man, we so much like to thank our special guest, Christopher Klein, who hopped on board, helped us break down all of this this plethora of talent that's ready to explode and emerge on the NBA scene. And once again, I'd like to thank my brother, man, Mr. Warren Shaw, as we give you exactly what you needed to hear in our 2018 NBA Draft special. For the Baseline, Cali, Warren Shaw, we appreciate you guys. You have a great time checking out the 2018 NBA Draft, and we'll catch up with you next time.